Outer Orange. Hello and welcome to Thursday. Yeah, live on Twitch. Crazy on Twitch. Wild. I kind of just wanted to talk to you guys about some of the decks you will see, and also kind of like some popular decks you'll see, and then within the popularity, what you can do to kind of help yourself against these certain decks, right? So we're gonna kind of do it like that. Derek Dow does these like top 10 videos, and the last time we did this for standard, and actually went surprisingly well. So this time, on YouTube it did well, and here it did well. So this time we're gonna kind of do the same thing, but we're gonna do for V. So say hello to YouTube if you wish. YouTube will see you. But anyway, starting off, we're gonna start with Gold Paladin. Hey, oh yeah, future you. Future you is coming near you. Near you. Future you, guys. This is future you. Right now we're talking to the present you that was in the past, but you're talking to future you currently. But when you watch the YouTube video, it'll be past you. I love time. This is the deck that people have been talking about probably the most. I'm gonna be real with you. This deck is probably not the strongest right now. Actually more counterable than previous Gurgit was. This is Holy Shine Dragon kind of with Gurgit. You know, like keep in mind, this isn't the only version you'll see it. You might see some that are just pure Gurgit. You might see some that are Holy Shine focused with grade 3s in them. There's different ways to build this Gold Paladins deck. I would say that the most non-optimal was probably Gurgit and Holy Shrine at once, but I could be wrong. Like, it's just, I personally think it's a little too grade 3 heavy. I think overall Gold's got extremely grade 3 heavy, and I would say it's really easy to knock it out if you just rush them down. Just rush this deck down. This is something a Gurgitson told me about like way back when this was kind of first revealed, and yeah, just rush it down. I know the counterblast is important. I know this says counterblast. I know this says counterblast. I know this says counterblast, and we all know this says counterblast. However, I think if you just push this deck as fast as possible, you'll actually see it fall apart really fast. I did test into this deck a couple different variants, and I did notice that if I just keep applying pressure, all these grade 3s in their hand just start being doo-doo towards them. It really doesn't help them. Some run the Ezel engine, which I think does help a little bit in some situations, but overall I think this deck starts falling apart once you try to once you just keep on pushing it. Even regular decks that are more regular Gurgit focused, they still can't deal with the rush of some decks, and I definitely would think that if you just keep applying pressure, you'll be okay, as long as you are able to do so in the deck that you're playing. Now, another thing to note, that this, you'll definitely see probably at least one round with this deck. It might make a top, might not, I'm not too sure on that, but you'll probably see at least one deck, one variation of gold. So 100% expect to see golds. It is still a good deck to take, and some people are comfortable with it. You don't have to change too much. You just have to throw in this card in whatever deck you're building. Boom, your Gold Paladins deck is complete, so you're good to go. Boom, bam, we got Aqua Force. I would say this deck is another deck that this deck is actually insanely popular right now. The Thavas engine, the Restanding, the Promo City, and I think because of just popularity alone, you'll just see a crap ton of this. You'll just see seamen everywhere. Just everywhere you go, you'll probably see them, because I've been seeing a lot of people starting to enter with this deck a lot, especially now with the homie A, homie girl B. You know, we got kind of like the full engine now to kind of just do whatever you want to do, and honestly, this deck just performs really well. I can't remember which one this one. I think this was like I think this one the BRO is that tops. Oh yeah, seamen. They're just seamen. That's what guys, they're just seamen. Look, they're just men in the sea. Men in the sea. Seamen. But anyway, overall, yeah, it's Aqua Force. The way to beat it is to just survive its first Thava. What is this? No, this is Lambros. So you survive its first whatever Lambros turn, and then you kill it the turn after. But anyway, so yeah, this is your typical deck. Expect to see it. You know, try to get a Heal Guardian or two. It'll definitely help you. If you look at top 5 of the grade 3 searcher, please grab a Heal Guardian. It'll definitely help you get some matchup like this. You really need to shut down their early turns, kind of help you with the later turns, because what you want to do is essentially you want to guard through their first like 3 or 4 turns, and then you just push them out and try to kill them. Usually their hand isn't too great and they'll probably die and fall apart. Another thing is this deck is very piece reliant. They really just see their pieces, so if you start watching them break, that's a good time for you to kind of just start trying to kill them as fast as possible. Another deck that may or may not come back is actually Astro Poets. Nothing has changed about this deck. Absolutely nothing. This deck is still exactly how it was, and guess what? It still does the exact same thing it's been doing. So guess what? It can still exist and top and do its thing and high roll to you to death. So as much as people aren't talking about this deck is still really stupid. So because it's really stupid, you should definitely watch out for it. Now, I will say, out of all the decks out there, I do think that specifically Poets may not be as common to see, because the thing about it, it's a very high roll heavy deck. You kind of need to, you kind of need to really just Cairo every game, and because BCS has longer rounds, it might be harder to take a deck like this. And Springfest is a little bit easier because you have like 2 other people you can kind of lean on in case you low roll one match. You know, you low roll, but your buddies, buddy A, buddy B are like, but we won, so it's okay, you know, type of situation. But it doesn't mean that this deck may not show up. I still can see this deck showing up and doing this thing. Oh, this meta that we're currently going into is very aggressive. You can still one-shot people out. If you truly know this deck like in and out, you can actually kind of play around your own deck a little bit. You can slow down the pace a little bit, you know, try to grind for these and kind of survive and then go for lethal. You know, 7 force markers is still insanely huge, whether you go force 1 or force 2, whatever you decide. You don't need to necessarily one-shot, but one-shot is pretty good with the meta that we're kind of going into. So with this being a one-shotter can knock out a lot of the meta decks out of the park before they get the chance to do anything. Oh, did I tell you guys how to beat it? I didn't tell you guys how to beat it. The way to beat it is you gotta be very cautious on the CB. Notice that this counterblasts. And like, I know it sounds strange, but this counterblast is actually very important, and they'll early counterblast with this, right? And then this one isn't running it, but there's actually this card as well as a counterblast, and then there's also the other card that draws. I think it's a counterblast as well. So depending on how you give counterblast, if you see they start breaking or if they miss like on this or something like that, you can actually deny a CB for them not to be able to straight up search out their Astro Deity. So you can kind of be careful that way. Heal Guardian is also very good. -2 to crit, you know, the Valkyrion or their Vanguard swing will kind of help you in certain matchups. Going second definitely kind of sucks against a matchup like this, but you know, if they start breaking, it's in your advantage. You can kind of start applying pressure pretty easily. Dark Irregulars. Now, Dark Irregulars, this is an old list, but Dark Irregulars actually just got a upgrade. They got the Atrocious Blow, I believe it's called, and I actually just recently tested it today. And during that time, I faced against DI. And Atrocious Blow definitely, I think it's called Atrocious Blow, might be a Torius Blow or something, I don't know, but that card is good. You can pretty much pretend that that card is like in this slot or something. I don't know. I don't really know where it fits into DI, but that card is actually pretty good. And this one doesn't run a Mon, but most run also like 2 copies of a Mon. So something to keep in mind, DI will probably show up. We had a really big showing of DI over in New York, New Jersey. So I would be surprised if people don't bring more. I expect to see DI, and I think you should expect to see DI too. So some ways to kind of knock this deck out a little bit. There's 2 approaches. One of them is kind of the more obvious one, and that's don't give up Counterblast when they ride up. It is a straight Soul Charge 3, and they can draw a card on top of that. You are giving them the ability to unbrick themselves while also drawing a card, while also soul charging, and it's just not very good. You should definitely try and avoid giving this deck Counterblast early. Sometimes it's not always the way, because unfortunately sometimes they miss and they go into a Mon and they kind of just do their thing anyway, but usually it's best to not give them the 3 soul that they get early. It is 3 soul, which means that's a 3k additional front that will go onto Shacharat, which means they're 1 step closer to Hope on Damp, which is this card right here, and you definitely 100% do not want to see this happen. You do not want them to get on Hope on Damp. They usually go from Amon to Shacharat, right? So you want to slow down that Amon to Shacharat pacing as fast as possible. Or if they go to Shacharat, you don't want them to be at 20, because then you can actually survive and then kill them turn after, because they usually won't have enough to deal with everything. So that's pretty much how you deal with the deck. I will say sometimes they can one-shot you with Amon if you don't have a Perfect Guard early, so try mulligan for a Perfect Guard if you can. And, you know, just, or if you go first and you're playing a Protect deck, you know, that's another thing to keep in mind. You have a Perfect Guard against Amon. Know how to foo out, how to foo in, know how to deal with foo, you know, because this is the biggest card that kind of makes people start like freaking out, is what card to put into soul, and it kind of screws them. So just, you know, realize what you're doing, like when you're putting a card into soul, like how is it helping you, is it fixing your hand, blah blah blah. So yeah, something to keep in mind. Foo. Good old Angie, Onge Pants, Anginator, BRO, Onge Tabulous. I'm running out of stuff to say about Onge. But anyways, this is Onge. Honestly, I don't expect this deck to show up too much, but it probably still will, just because, again, Prism players moving on over to something else. If they want to keep playing Bermuda, this is one of the better decks to play. In Bermuda, there really isn't much else. You can play Highlander, like pure Highlander, like not just Onge Highlander. This is Ongelander. You can play basic Onge if you want. You can go for the aggressive Weasel Aqua approach. You know, you have a lot of options. You go to soul charging routes, Q-Tire, you know, whatever you want to do. I will say, personally, I think if you're playing the right deck into this, you will struggle. You will struggle playing. I think that there's just some kind of piece reliance. Your hand is kind of doo-doo. Your hand kind of doo-doo, not gonna lie. So you got all these normal units in your hand, you know, they're not really triggers unless you hit them on drive checks. So if you don't see Q-Tire early, you kind of have like a real struggling thing. But this is the first place guy. This is Man Long, actually. This is his thing from BRO, the person I interviewed while commentating streaming over in V. So not just me, the commentators, we as commentators like interviewed him, say this is the list he took. Of course, if you're going to take something like this, I would recommend the perfect guard switch over, get one great basic perfect guard from normal unit, back to back first place. Yes indeed. And he mentioned, you know, taking one of these, making a perfect guard. I recommend that too. That's how I've been playing the deck as well. But anyway, overall, ways to deal with this deck: just rush it down, just rush it down. They, especially if you're going first, just rush it down. They just can't keep up. You push them to 5 early enough, they can't do anything. They just flop sideways and die. They're so focused on having normal units in their hand that, you know, in order to activate Onge's skill, you know, Onge does require all normal units in order to do the bouncing. So there isn't that much bouncing of triggers anymore. That was a Prism thing. You're not doing that here. So once you get triggers on the board, they're just kind of existing. If you see Q-Tire, swing into it. If you see Rolenka, swing into it. Don't let those stay on the board if you're going for the late game. I would highly recommend just, this deck takes about 3 grade 3 turns to fully start killing, at least the Highlander version. But long story short, if you want to beat this deck, you just want to kill it before it gets to its win con, essentially. A good example is actually just Pui Nubatama. If you put Nubatama, you just kind of auto win against this deck. You just Jimmy Congo them, and they just can't do anything. They won't be able to keep up anymore. They'll lose their whole hand. And then bird them. In English, we can play bird, so play bird. But if you don't, obviously, if you're not playing Nubatama, which I'm assuming there may be some Nubatamas, but it's actually not a bad deck right now, and especially since the bird's unrestricted, you could play Nubatama, but chances are that won't be seen. But anyway, regardless, just keep rushing it down. Just keep rushing, just keep going, just never stop steam, just never stop, and you should be fine. Let's talk about Grand Blue, one of my favorite clans to talk about. Good old Grand Blue Night Rose stuff. We saw some Night Rose's top just literally just a weekend ago. Obviously, they didn't have Clay Collection. Keep in mind, they didn't have Clay Collection, so things will change. But regardless, Night Rose is still a very popular deck. A lot of people still have all their Night Rose decks. You know, so many people talk with them. We'll probably see a Night Rose still show some. We'll probably still see Night Rose come up. Is this Sabri's list? I actually don't know. I might have grabbed Sabri's list. That has this in it. Some things to know about Night Rose. Honestly, Counterblast Denial is in your favor. You want to shut down this as fast as possible. But it looks like it's Sabri's. So you want to shut down this as fast as possible. Don't give them this early on. There are actually times where if you just give them no counterblast, they just don't do anything. Your goal with this deck is to slow it down fast enough to where you can catch up and kill them. So their hand isn't amazing. Their only out is really ships. Sometimes they'll even damage a ship, and now they're kind of stuck with one draw the whole game. Yeah, 7 Seas is pretty, we're actually gonna talk about 7 Seas here in a little bit. But so this deck specifically, you want to stay at a kind of like a lower damage. You want to deny counterblast early on, and then you, as you start catching up, they'll start falling behind. If you're playing like a decently good resource engine type of deck, you should have no issues out resourcing Grand Blue. That's kind of where I feel like people fall apart with this deck. They just don't know what to do. They start seeing the dragons, they start panicking. The dragons are fine. It is okay. If you stay at low damage, you will not have a problem going around the dragons. It's just 1 damage. It's just 1 damage. You just got to be careful about the Vanguard. Is honestly should be more your concern, because if they hit crits on Vanguard, you're kind of screwed. The dragons then become more scary. So that's kind of the biggest thing. Definitely this early on pressure, you kind of want to deny this. Sometimes it's not, I know you want to swing, but it's not a good idea to swing. It may not be a bad idea to pick up a Heal Guardian somewhere along the way if you want to shut down some turns, and stay at around the 3 damage interval. If they start milling too fast, you want to stay at 3 damage, because then if they try to, they'll come to a point where they won't have a choice but to dragon you. And if you're at 3 damage and they're trying to dragon you, they probably already lost, because they can't kill you. If you have a perfect guard, you can take 2 and you can guard the rest. They won't be able to kill you, and then they just flop sideways and die. On top of the fact that the turn that they dragon you means that they're 2 cards down of draw, or maybe even potentially 4 cards down of draw, depending on how they go ship, right? And because of that, they're actually really behind, and that gives you even more room to catch up. So you just gotta watch what they're doing and try to see just think ahead. They're calling out ghost ships, that means they're drawing. They're setting up for dragons. They're calling out dragons, that means their hand sucks. You know, you gotta think about these things. So now we're kind of going into some of the newer decks, some of the stuff that, you know, you're not used to seeing. Some stuff that we saw our decks before. We've seen those decks. We kind of know what they're doing. But what about the decks that we don't know? We don't know about. This is a good perfect example of decks we don't know about that we'll probably see. This is the Steam Maiden's Gear Chronicle deck, and it is good. It is a good deck. I'd be surprised if you don't see this. I'm actually expecting a lot of this. It got a big upgrade. This card is really good. This card's really good. This card's really good. There's a lot of filtering this deck does now, a lot of binding it does. This is really, really solid along with it. So this is definitely a deck that you should definitely keep cautions of. By the way, this deck is actually very popular. There's been a lot of people talking about this deck. I'd be surprised if this deck doesn't top I'd be very surprised because this deck is actually really, really good. We just had in my shop week, this actually got first place, a literal first place. It was like the second or third time he's ever played the deck, and he topped with it. I will say one thing, this deck's a little hard to pilot. You can misplay very easily with this deck if you don't guard properly, and it's actually really easy to misplay. This deck does require a lot of setup and a lot of piloting, so I think as the season goes later, people will start perfecting this deck more. But I think some of the early players, like the BCS we're about to have, I think people have a little bit of struggle time. The way to deal with it is you want to be very cautious how much counterblast you give it, because it kind of plays like Beatrice Grand Blue, where for every counterblast it gets pretty much a counter charge, but then on top of that, like eventually it becomes not free and they have to waste a lot of counterblast to kind of keep attacking. And with that being said, if you give them like 4 open counterblasts or something, they're going all in. And once they hit the second force marker, like once pretty much they ride again, it's probably usually death at that point, because usually a defense will not help you after that. So definitely something to keep cautious of. This is probably one of the best decks in Gears right now, and I would even argue it's one of the best decks to take. But yeah, just be very cautious. This deck is, I would highly recommend testing into this. Oh, we got the 7 Cs. Oh my gosh, it's the 7 Cs. Would you look at that? 7 Cs popping up on this little chart that I have here. So it's 7 Cs. I put this together just kind of really quick. I don't know what else to kind of throw in here. I put together like a pretty basic list. But anyway, this is good old 7 Cs. The 7 Cs is actually showing a lot of popularity. I was actually kind of surprised, but I was seeing a lot of people play 7 Cs, mainly because it's really cheap to build. It is. Oh, yeah, it's my husband. It's my husbando. Look how adorable he is. Look at him. Look at. Gotta take a moment of silence. Appreciate the homie. Hello. I see you're doing well. Okay, cool. Anyway, so late game is insanely strong. Its biggest weakness is that its hand is pretty fake, and if you can afford to rush it down. Excel clans kind of have an upper advantage to this deck, but this deck also plays like an Excel clan. So this deck is one of those decks where the minute they get to this, essentially, they kind of just auto win. It's really hard to, deal with this. They're gonna keep bringing it back. I would recommend early on to slow down their milling off of this and this. Their only out at that point will be this and where's the other card? Where's Slash Shade? It's Slash Shade. So if you don't give them counterblast early, all they can do is bind with this, hope they hit what they want, and kind of use this as a way to push through. But if you just heal guard this, then they just can't do anything. If you slow down the mill from here to here, you'll have an additional turn to kind of work with, because the idea is to not make this too big, right? So if this is small enough, you'll be able to guard it and then you'll be able to kill, right? So their hand gets relatively small and relatively bad as the game goes later. Like, look at all these 5k shields. Yes, you can run crits with this deck, but it doesn't always work very well. You kind of need to see your stuff. This deck is extremely piece reliant. It starts falling apart very quickly, but it can randomly auto win even on first ride on Night Mist. So you just gotta be very careful. You gotta be very careful with this deck. I expect to at least see some people bring this deck. Like I said, it's stupidly cheap to build, so you need to learn this matchup. I recommend just not letting their on hits hit at all early on. Just guard for life. Don't give them counterblast. Just keep guarding. Open up heal guardians. You'll need them. You'll need them so badly. If you can, keep in mind, this is Protect clan, especially if you're a Force clan. You already have the advantage of just being a higher base than them and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, your best thing is when they run into this instead of Night Mist. That's like your best feeling, because they can miss this actually pretty easily. Leopold. So this is a deck I've recently been testing a lot. This isn't a perfect build. Don't take my word for the build. The build doesn't matter. Actually, the build does matter. You can run this restander approach, either this or, put Culture Gorilla in, whatever you want to do for the high roll. But overall, so this deck's actually really, really solid. I've been testing into this a lot. I've been watching people play this deck a lot, and it actually is really good. I'm very surprised. This deck plays like Prism Excel almost, where you're constantly filtering. Oh, well, not filter. Well, let me put it this way. You're getting 2 Excel markers a turn. Getting a crit, yeah, this is great nature. Yeah, it plays like here we are. So you get 2 Excel markers a turn. You have a top 5 skill, what you call whatever you want, not like the old one where you kind of had to call specific stuff, but you call whatever you want, essentially, that, it's a unit. And then on top of that, so that's 2 free pluses to the board. And then we have this card right here, which gets you another plus to the board, while also sending back triggers. The way the skill works is you can actually mill off of this, and if you mill a trigger off of this, it counts as all 3. So you can send that trigger and another trigger back, and you'll actually still get the condition to get another free card to the board, which is Researcher Fox. And Researcher Fox is also really really good because Researcher Fox gets additional 5Ks every time you mill, on top of the fact that it also searches your Vanguard, so it can search out your Vanguard, and it lets you draw a card on top of that. So you're just plussing for days on top of having beat sticks. Who thought of that? I don't know. And then Vanguard has a crit on it just because it can. You have a passive 5K front on top of that. And then also, like I said, these stack like crazy. And actually, personally, I want to try the Isabel engine just because I think Isabel is hilarious. Just stacking 3 is just really funny to me. So I personally think this should just be Culture Gorilla. But, you know, you do you. Lemur is really carrying this deck. Lemur makes this deck so much easier. And yeah, just overall, this deck's really, really freaking good. Since you're playing Leopold, you get to choose which one that you activate after Leopold's skill is already done. So, you know, if you know what your opponent's hand is, boom, bam, you know, they're holding Sentinels. Oh no, you can't use Sentinels. Oh, they're not holding triggers. Oh no, you can't use triggers, you know, so you kind of think it through. But yeah, numbers get pretty big. I think the only thing about this deck is still feels a little lackluster somewhere. Like I've been testing a little bit more and I've been seeing that there's still like a little touches of missing, but it is a really good deck. You have like a 10 card hand, a lot. I recommend it. I think this deck is relatively meta. So Jewel Knight says, I actually haven't tested this variant. I've tested the Solomon variants. I've tested the older variants. I've put this engine into other Royals Paladin decks. This deck is very just multi-attack aggro on top of a guard restrict now, so I feel like it just kind of upgrade. Be very cautious about this card right here. You know, if you want to put a booster behind your Vanguard, maybe don't, because if they ride this thing and then they ride something on top of it, they'll retire your booster that you just put behind your Vanguard. So you can play around this card. I would recommend playing around it. I've been that person that accidentally called a booster and then I screwed myself because then they just instantly retired it. But they have a lot of on-place abilities now, a lot of searching, a lot of stuff they can do. They pretty much just, it's a very aggro deck. It was already very aggro, and it pretty much got more aggro. I do expect to see this deck. It's actually at my locals, it's been performing well. It didn't get like first place, but it did end up in top 8 for Shop League, and we had actually a pretty big like showing. It wasn't like 5 or 10 people. I think we had like 30 or something. But anyway, long story short, this deck's pretty aggressive. Pretty good. It's a beatdown, and you can't really deny it too well. Like you can't deny it full combo. So let's go talk about some Kaguro. So Kaguro is actually one of those few decks that I feel like people aren't talking about, and I don't know why. It got a pretty good upgrade recently, and while I may not know how to fight this deck, I will tell you we might actually see this deck. Recently we had that 16 crit deck kind of go through, right? But they actually just got an upgrade. They got the homie. Well, they got the boy. You know, they got the Chad, you know, and Chad's actually pretty good. Chad kind of helps you not have to discard as much, which makes this card so much better. And it has Overlord in its name. Yeah, exactly. It now pluses. And then you have like this thing, this stupid card, and then I'm sorry, I know I'm super biased here, but you know, they got that stupid card. There's also another one. There's one that like forces you to guard a certain way. I think it's like this card or something. It is this card. It forces you to have to guard a certain way. And then they also got this guy. Yeah, I'm not expecting this deck that much, but I would be surprised if someone doesn't take it and tries to top with it. I think you might see it more than you might think. I think it got a slight like kind of like a little upgrade in consistency. So I do expect to see this deck. Overlord Donation, guys, gotta love it. Vanquisher. So Vanquisher, you'll probably see some Vanky boy, some homie. I feel like Vanquisher didn't really get an upgrade or anything like that, but you have more options. Like you can run this guy now, so you can kind of just do your thing. Do your thing with this. You know, this is very aggressive. It is 3 counterblast. It's very heavy, especially if you use book and stuff like that. So you have to be kind of cautious with the CB. But this deck has always been in a pretty good spot. It's never been bad. It's never been like, you know, amazing. Like it's not like, you know, it's not like tier 0 or tier 1 or anything like that. But I feel like it's been a really, really solid, good tier 2, like low tier 1 spot for a while now. And I feel like the deck just performs really well. And you doesn't have to worry about Prism anymore. And you know, they can just kind of do their thing and win. And yeah, their turn 2 is really good, and book just kind of pushes it. But yeah, this deck is actually pretty hard to beat, I would say. They kind of just don't stop doing what they're doing. They're more likely lose to themselves before they'll lose to you, if that makes sense. Because if they don't see their pieces, they kind of just can't do enough. But once they do start seeing their pieces, just keep cautious of Narukami. They're pretty aggressive late game. They're all on their grade 3. Everything's on their grade 3 turn and on. So just be careful. Just, you know, Vanquisher's just annoying. Avengers. Now, as I mentioned earlier, we're kind of in this meta where you kind of want to kill your opponent before they, you know, get to do stuff. And the Revengers is definitely one of the best decks to do that with. It's different Overlord. It's different Riviere. It's just a beatdown deck as well that just asks for constant heal guardians and perfect guards and really, really good guard, right? So this deck just kind of pops off. And once you give it 4 damage, it pops off even more. So your approach to this is to not give him 4 damage. Try your best not to give him 4 damage. You always want to kind of swing for lethal to force the guard out of their hand, and once you give them the full damage and they survive, say you push them to 6 but they heal on the 6 damage, you're pretty much dead next turn. Because at 4 they'll be doing a lot more shenanigans between this and, you know, this, and there's just a lot more that kind of goes on when they're at 4 versus them being at 3. And that's actually because it gets to be said a lot about a lot of decks. Like Spectral Duke kind of has this whole thing. If they're at 5, they kind of do a little bit more. There's like, you know, Ripples that kind of falls under this thing, where if they're at 4, they have a little bit more. Value Saber kind of falls under this engine. If they're at 4, they do a little bit more. So you want to kind of be cautious when you're seeing these decks have, if I'm at 4 damage, I do something thing. Maybe you should be cautious about how you're swinging. If you're a Force deck, it's a little bit easier for you, especially if you play Force 2, or, you know, you have some crits, or you have different ways to kind of like apply pressure. It's not as hard for you, but as an Excel deck, it might be a little bit harder. But that's pretty much V. That's our little V video that we just did there to kind of give you guys kind of a start to kind of what BCS is going to start looking like. I will definitely keep very cautious of, out of all that, definitely Steam Maiden. Pretty much everything I listed, those main lists that I showed you guys, are definitely all decks that are pretty, you want to test into them, see what they're doing, you know, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, V Premium Pogs. Yeah, V Premium is very Pogs, very Poggies. But yeah, that's it for the V portion. I actually forgot to bring up Onge and the promo. Onge is gonna come back. Onge is dying right now, but it'll come back. I meant to bring that up. But Onge promo, the Moitra promo, is gonna make that deck insanely good. By the way, that deck's gonna go up again. Right now it's gonna go on a decline and it's gonna go back up. So, and then the same thing with Gears. They're getting Tiger. They're getting that Tiger card. They're getting Nani. Nani's good. Nani's a good card. It's gonna make that Tiger deck a lot better. So something to keep in mind. Claret. Is Claret good? I don't know. Tiger promo Poggies. Tiger promo very Poggies. All right, I'm gonna go eat. Yeah, you guys want to listen to Eric talk about Jet for like 15 minutes? Enjoy. Have fun. Enjoy Eric. And I'll see you guys in the next one. All right, I'm done being stupid. That was fun.